Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Live with Liz. Today's topic is responding to RFPs and RFIs. And if you probably can tell, we're still on the road. So hopefully we don't have any distractions like we did last week and have to cut it short, because this topic is so important. It is absolutely relevant to your law firm practice. And if maybe you're sitting there saying, what the heck is an RFP or an RFI? All these acronyms tend to blend together and people get confused, but it's simple. An RFI is a request for information, and an RFP is a request for proposal. And these two things speak directly to the heart of getting new clients, of winning business, and even the act of being able to participate in one of these, especially the RFP, is critical to turning contacts into clients and making the business wheels turn for your firm. So for some background on my experience with requests for proposals and requests for information. Hey, Christina, it's nice to see you today. So I used to be in-house in the United States managing large global intellectual property portfolios. And a big part of that was hiring counsel around the world in different jurisdictions. And when a company or even a law firm is ready to hire outside counsel on behalf of a corporation or a client, they usually conduct some research first, doing a request for information and eventually a request for proposal to actually consider your law firm in the running for the work that they have to do in your region or jurisdiction. And throughout that experience, I came to learn a lot about how different requests for proposals are made, how different law firms end up being invited to participate in the process, and what makes a good response to these requests. Because not all of these responses are equal, and there are different practices that different corporations have when it comes to prioritizing what's important for them and whether or not you get the business. So requests for information can be informal. They can be as simple nowadays as a WhatsApp message saying, hey, how much do you charge to do this type of work, filing an IP asset in your jurisdiction? Or, tell me a little bit about that process that you have in your country for getting something done. And it's not always necessarily related to IP. This is actually applicable to a lot of different practice areas. And even in my own experience, we did it with a lot of other, I like to say peripheral practice areas like licensing and franchising, but a lot of corporate law. This applies to international law, business law, and you see kind of the same things over and over again. So an RFI, a request for information, can be informal, but they're still important, and they can lead to your participation in a request for proposal. And when a client actually has a request for proposal and you're in and you get it, what do you do? So often these are fillable forms that you use online to give information about your team, your practice, the services you're offering, of course, your pricing, timelines. And what these companies are looking for is whether or not your services match with what their needs are right now. What the cost is certainly is an issue. Often this cost sensitivity is much more important, at least for US companies when they are publicly traded as opposed to when they're privately held, when they're looking for the best of the best, maybe as opposed to maybe just someone who can get the work done. So these are things to keep in mind. And one of the things right off the bat that I would find interesting is response time. So when you're responding to an RFP or an RFI, it is important to get that response out, at least an acknowledgement within 24 hours and the full response within 24 to 48 hours. And I'll tell you, a lot of firms don't make it. They can't respond as quickly as that. And part of that is preparation and not having the information ready. And part of that is just maybe not even matching the services that are being requested at that point. But if you delay your response to either an RFI or an RFP, that could mean that you lose running for this work and that you're just cut out. One of the things that was interesting in some of the places I've worked in a couple of different companies for a lot of different portfolios. So I've had different experiences along the way when it came to conducting these. And one company said, okay, we're not taking the the cheapest and we're not taking the most expensive. Weed them out, and that's how we narrow down who we're actually going to hire in the end. And if you didn't know that, maybe that's something to consider. But I also wouldn't worry too much about where you fall. If your services are a good value for the price that you're charging, then you will still be in the mix for it. But it is something to know that if you are absolutely the cheapest, I'm going to question whether or not the quality of service is worth it. And if you're the most expensive, I'm going to say, well, it's probably not worth it and cut you out. So that was actually a policy where we were. Even when it came down to selecting people in terms of rankings, if you included something like that in your response, if you were top tier, you might get hired for being top tier. If you were low tier, of course, you wouldn't include that. But just to keep in mind, you want to make sure that the services that you're offering and the price that you're charging are the right value and a good value for the clients. And if you're offering these services on a regular basis, they will be. You'll know it. You'll be able to tell what's marketable and what's not. And all it will take is a few rejections for you to make those adjustments, right? So pricing matters, but it's also not the most important thing for a lot of these. So going back to that response time can be an instant narrower of whether or not you're in the running for this RFP and if you're successful. And while the acknowledgement is important within 24 hours, if you are able to also include, along with the acknowledgement, the actual response to the RFP or the RFI within those 24 hours, you're going to go up in that running for that business. And it's going to make a difference as to whether or not you actually get it. But there are some other considerations too. And I would say one of the biggest ones is communication and the quality of your communication. So it's not simply, are you responding and are you responding quickly? It's, is your response, is it answering my request? And this is something that I would find the most challenging on a sophisticated level for law firms to respond to appropriately and to understand. So in some cases, a corporate might be looking for something specific related to services, and it might not be so obvious to you when you receive the RFP. It might be something that is a little hidden, a little more obscure, and you have to really make sure that when you're responding, you include your services that meet that need. And maybe they're looking for someone who's capable of doing things in more than one jurisdiction or a hub service like we talked about last week. If you're answering it and saying, oh, our services are great, yada, yada, and you don't mention the hub service that they specifically inquired about, then you're going to be out of the running. You're not going to make it because you have not included this tiny detail, but it's a big thing for them in terms of the services that they're really looking for. Now, there are some other things that they might be specifically seeking in terms of your services and your pricing. So when you get that RFP, or RFI, either one, it is very important that you read through it, that you understand it. And then if you don't understand it, you ask questions. And maybe you don't ask questions to the client who sent it to you. Maybe you hire a professional like our team at Firm Forward to take a look at it for you and make sure that your response is up to par. But it is absolutely essential that you go through that first step to really understand what those needs are before you put the response together, or you could end up looking foolish and not responding the way you actually intended to. Now, there are some other things to consider in your request and to be prepared when you're responding, to be able to communicate well, to be able to respond quickly. We recommend having some of the essential information ready to go basically at all times. So if you've got your document management system, or if you've got a place where you're storing this information, this should be something that you have readily accessible to the people who are responding to these requests. And it should include things like marketing collateral, so descriptions of your firm, descriptions of different people, the services that you provide, your team. And these are things that you should have in a manner that is visually appealing, that is concise, that highlights the excellent quality of your communication. So this should be perfect from the get-go. And it shouldn't be something that you have to recreate every time you get one of these requests. You should have this level of information ready to go. Ideally, you will have this information customizable so that you are able to make those adjustments and speak directly to the request that you're getting without having to recreate that wheel every single time. Now, in some cases, you won't be able to send all of the attachments that you want to send. A lot of these requests are becoming more automated, where you're having computers make decisions instead of people. So sometimes that information that you can prepare in advance may not necessarily be transmittable when it comes time to actually responding. And we know that. So there are some other ways that you can enhance what you're doing when you make that response. If you are participating in a response that is highly automated, that is based heavily on data, then there are some other things that you want to consider when you're responding. Of course, you want to be accurate and truthful. It won't help to expand on your numbers or try and inflate your services beyond what your capabilities really are. That will only end up hurting you in the end. There is a story that I've got very quickly about one of the service providers, a law firm that I worked with a long time ago. So I'm going to give a shout out here to Sarkis Kenzian. I'm probably saying his last name wrong. I'm sorry, Sarkis. He's based in Armenia. And this is my request for proposal that I did a long time ago that sticks out the most in my mind as one of the best responses I ever got. And I was managing a large portfolio with a lot of different assets. And I was very concerned because at this point I was taking work from a jurisdiction that was managing Armenia, which was Russia. We were using counsel in Russia to handle everything in Armenia. And I needed to find a lawyer in Armenia. How do you do it? So I ended up going to LinkedIn and I find this guy named Sarkis and I send him a request for proposal, but I'm very reluctant and don't think it's going to work out because I look at this firm and I think, oh, they're a little bit small. I don't think they're going to be able to handle the portfolio. But this attorney responded promptly with excellent communication. And even in the midst of other responses, I knew right away that this was the attorney I was going to hire for this portfolio. And I know, Sarkis, I know that there are some very difficult things happening in Armenia right now. So maybe this is not the moment to call out your excellent services. We are thinking about you and we're with you. We are concerned about what's happening in your region of the world, but we also want to acknowledge that the work that you did in your response to my request for proposal way back when was outstanding. And it was absolutely what I recommend for people when they're responding to RFIs and responding to RFPs in general. So what are the takeaways here? You want to be prompt. You want to have excellent communication. You want to absolutely make sure that your response is matching the request. So don't answer a lot of questions that aren't there. Don't promote the team and services that you have that are not a part of the request. Be very focused on what the request is actually asking and make sure that you're a good fit. And if you're having difficulty getting in and being part of the running, then there are some other things that you can do to promote your business to be invited to participate in these processes. And when they're data centric, you absolutely need to be truthful and accurate. You still want to be prompt. And there are some follow-up steps that you're going to want to take as well. So once you go ahead and release the information, if it's an RFI, that's actually a good time to ask what the proposal looks like, what their timeline might be. You're actually considering hiring, and don't be afraid to differentiate yourself a little bit with your follow-up. And even something is sending something in the mail. I've said this before, even a card now in COVID just feels like a lifeline to the real world. If you're participating in these processes, you can absolutely do that, considering that there's a time lapse involved. So make sure that your request is timely first. Maybe even pick up the phone and a voice call, which is a little strange. I guess some people get a little frustrated with voicemail these days, but follow up, super important no matter how you do it. And if you ever need any help with filling out these requests and making sure that the communication is correct or making sure that you're responding to the right questions, we're happy to help you with that. Send us questions to solutions@firmforward.com for more information or set up a meeting to talk to us more about it. I hope you found this helpful about RFPs and RFIs. Please join us again next week. Hopefully we'll be back in Houston in our regular time and our regular space. And And it's really great to see you all again this week. Take care, everybody. See you on the next Live with Liz. Bye.